Hydraulic fracking is a mechanical process that involves fracturing localized rock by using a pressurized liquid. The intent is to fracture the rocks in order to release the natural gas that is held inside. Methane gas and toxic chemicals leach out from the system and contaminate nearby groundwater. Methane concentrations are 17 times higher in drinking water wells near fracturing sites than in normal wells. Only half of the fracturing liquid is recovered. The rest is left in the ground and it isn't biodegradable. Waste fluids evaporate, releasing organic compounds into the atmosphere that create contaminated air, acid rain, and ground level ozone. Diesel fuel equipment may degrade air quality. Fracking was first used in 1947 and was first commercially successfully applied in 1949. Throughout the 1970s and onwards, it has been used to increase the yield of drinking water from wells. In 2012, 2.5 million hydraulic fracturing jobs have been performed on oil and gas wells worldwide. Over 1 million of those have occurred in the United States. There are many reasons why hydraulic fracturing is applied. First, it stimulates groundwater wells. It preconditions and induces rocks to cave in during mining. It enhances remediation processes, disposes of waste, measures stress in the earth, and provides heat extraction to produce electricity and enhance geothermal systems. There are many reasons why fracking is popular. It is seen as less harmful as coal, less expensive than coal. It allows for more jobs to become available. It is responsible for huge increases in domestic production and improves economic prosperity in local areas. Fracking involves the injection of more than 1 million gallons of water, sand, and chemicals at high pressure rates down and across wells, as far as 10,000 feet below the surface. The pressurized mixture causes the rock layer to crack. These fissures are held open by the sand particles so that oil from the shale can flow up to the well.
Alrighty, and now we'll talk about the pros and cons of fracking. Basically, we'll explore both sides of the world of fracking. So let's start with the pros. For the pros of fracking, we have a lot more natural gas will be available in areas where fracking is present, and also it'll lower the cost of generating electricity through natural gas. Right now, it's kind of a mix between coal and the fracking situation, but the fracking lowers it further than what the coal does. Fracking also provides employment opportunities, and that can be a pro, seeing how unemployment is such high right now. And another pro is that it reduces the need to import natural gas, as we can kind of do it on the U.S. soil here. Now on to the cons. Fracking has a lot of cons. I'll just kind of talk about a few that kind of stuck out to me. First and foremost, it contaminates individuals' water and air supplies. When you're in a certain distance from the fracking, it'll contaminate your water supply. Fracking also causes small earthquakes, which average around a 2 on the Richter scale, and along with those other two, it makes global warming a larger issue than what it kind of needs to be. And the process of fracking requires large amounts of water and chemicals. I think the average is about 2 tons of water just to kind of drill into the well. So I guess like with the pros and cons, it's kind of a personal opinion of which one outweighs the other. Is it the pros or is it the cons? In this presentation, I presented an equal number of pros and cons, but I don't know which group seems to be more dangerous to you. Is fracking really worth the risk? As a group, we all say no. We believe the disadvantages of fracking outweigh the advantages vastly. Why the cons outweigh the pros? Cons ultimately, they pose a greater risk and danger to the human race and environment as well. Cons like contaminating the water supply and the air supply, those pose a greater risk to the human race and the environment as well. Most of the pros are money related, and that's kind of all they kind of look out for. It's more so a money situation rather than looking out for man's best interests. And there's also like a slogan of "we can't drink money," and that kind of points out why the pros that support only looking out for the financial interest, um, that doesn't help us as a human race when it's affecting our water, something that we need to drink.
Now I'm going to talk about some environmentally friendly, using air quotes there, alternatives to hydrofracking and frack grass. I'm going to first talk about some that supply power to the grid and then some for liquid fuels. The first two types of grid power that are considered environmentally friendly are geothermal and hydroelectric. Both of these, hopefully, people are familiar with. One note I'd like to make about both of these sources of power is that all of the geothermal vents in North America that are capable of supplying power are either protected or already tapped, and all of the rivers capable of producing hydroelectric power are currently dammed or protected in the U.S. And now for the 21st century, alternative energies, there's wind power in the form of the familiar wind turbines, and then solar cells, also called solar photovoltaic, that convert solar energy into electrons. These solar cells use some rare earth elements like lithium, gallium, and arsenide to produce this solar photovoltaic energy. So one of the major problems with these solar cells is the use of lithium, which is an incredibly rare and dangerous element in the Earth's crust. First of all, there's not enough lithium to produce the number of solar cells needed to power the U.S. economy, let alone the world's. Secondly, the major mines for lithium are in northern Africa, more mines opening up in Bolivia, and basically other third world and developing world countries. And so another form of solar energy is passive solar, like a greenhouse. A lot of people have probably seen solar water heaters, which work very, very well. They can reduce your energy consumption by about 60%. And so another technology that's emerging is passive solar, where you use mirrors to heat up water to use that to generate electricity, rather than just the straight up photovoltaic solar energy. Okay, and so a lot of people wonder, well, why do you need liquid fuels if you can just, plug a car into the grid and charge up a battery? Well, the main problem is energy storage. Batteries are just not very energy dense. The most advanced lithium-ion batteries have an energy density of about 460 kilojoules per kilogram. If you compare that to gasoline, it has an energy density of about 47 megajoules per kilogram. Not to mention those lithium-ion batteries include all of the negatives and ethical dilemmas of mining lithium to produce them. So unless someone builds a better battery, we need liquid hydrocarbon fuels. Two common liquid fuels right now are ethanol and biodiesel. Ethanol is fermented from starch, which usually comes from corn in the U.S. And so you start to get into like the food versus fuel debate. Should we be spending our resources producing fuels or food for people? And biodiesel is starting to look like a lot better alternative because there's a lot better energy return on investment. You get about a 70% increase in energy versus the 6 from ethanol. But that still runs into the same problem of you have to grow a crop in order to transform it into biodiesel. So these in themselves have their own ethical dilemmas. So another kind of emerging in the U.S. is a process called anaerobic digestion, by which you generate biogas or syngas, which is methane, the same compound that you get from hydraulic fracturing. But the thing is, you can digest any sort of organic compound with this AD. So you're open to a lot more alternatives. You can digest waste, for instance. Dairy manure is the most common fuel source, and we generate way more dairy manure than we will ever use as a fertilizer. So that seems like a pretty good use of that wasted organic matter. So the downside to AD is it doesn't scale up very well. These reactors are pretty intricate, and they need a very, very stable balance of organisms inside them in order to function at peak efficiency. They also consume a large amount of the energy they produce in the form of heat, because the bacteria that generates this methane is mesophilic, meaning it likes temperatures around 35 to 50 degrees C. However, powering an economy with anaerobic digestion is entirely possible. Germany right now generates about 20% of its energy demand from anaerobic digestion at a municipal level, and by which they discharge their municipal sewage into an anaerobic digester. And so they not only generate energy for the town, but they also treat their sewage, their wastewater, and then can get clean water back out the back end. So Germany is a really good example of an emerging sustainable energy grid.
I'm going to get into the ethics of fracking. Rather than getting into specific ethics, I really just wanted to pose a few questions to get you thinking about it a little bit more, especially considering it's going to be done in Michigan pretty soon here, if it hasn't started already. So the real question is if it's worth it. So two questions to think about is who is being harmed and who it's helping. Obviously, it's harming private landowners via pollution of water and other things like the earthquakes and all of the other cons that were listed earlier. So these private landowners include farmers and houses with private wells, and really anywhere that's above the gas that's being pumped out. Also, there's wildlife, and on a larger scale, our entire ecosystem is being harmed by this. Everything is based around water, and if the water goes bad, everything's going to be affected. As for who it's helping, it's obviously helping Halliburton and other companies that are obtaining the natural gas, and then obviously natural gas consumers. Although the private landowners are in the who is being harmed category, they could also be in the who it is helping category, because prices are going to be maintained and the quantity available is going to stay there. So a scenario that you could think about that might kind of put you in a real life situation of something that's happening around the world right now is this one. Mr. and Mrs. Smith leased their property to allow fracking, even though their neighbors, who are dairy farmers, said no to the offer. When their neighbors' cattle die and the livelihood of their farm is in jeopardy, can Mr. and Mrs. Smith still justify the money they made? So once again, this is something that's occurring all around the world, these situations, and this is something that has potential to occur in Michigan if it should happen. So at what point does economic gain outweigh the damage done to our ecosystem? That tends to be the million-dollar question with regards to fracking. And I think that in the short term, people tend to focus more on short-term investments and increases in money and stuff like that, versus looking at the long-term problems that could occur from fracking. And then, as a Michigan resident, what do you think? Once again, this is something that's going to begin happening in Michigan very soon, if it hasn't happened already. So this is something that, as a resident of Michigan, you should be aware of, and you should know what's going on about it. So if you want more information on fracking, if this wasn't enough, one thing you could do is, just Google fracking. A lot of stuff comes up that might be a little bit less biased than our recording, as well as if you want more information on specifics of what fracking is, you could go to dangersoffracking.com, and they have an awesome walkthrough that you can go through to. It's got nice graphics and stuff. Otherwise, you can talk to your local representatives or legislatures, or go to a township hall meeting or something. I'm sure that it's going to be something that's coming up. That's going to be coming up in most meetings around the state. Especially for areas in northern Michigan. I know one big thing that's been happening in Michigan is that the DNR has started leasing out properties to allow for fracking. So that's something that we all have a right to say something about. And yeah, just think about it and keep these questions in mind. And we hope we taught you something today. And if you'd like any more information, you can go ahead and take a look at our list of references.